Good day, people. Thanks for the introduction and for being here. I think for me it's an honor. Biochar mill is really well known, and unfortunately, up till now, we heard only one time the word biochar. It was from the agricultural minister yesterday. I was really surprised, but I am also surprised that during the discussion we had carbon sequestration, that biochar. This will change now, and if I look around, I can see many faces I know already. I'm convinced about biochar. So, in my opinion, it would have been better we do this in the plenary and not in a side room, as it happens always also at the COPs. So, okay, what I will do, maybe you have already heard about biochar. I will briefly, of course, introduce what is biochar, what's the main properties, and then proof of concept is the main issue. First of all, from a practical point of view, or better, and then also from a scientific point of view. I have only one slide on the ecological effects because our topic is carbon sequestration, and it will be the rest, and I will also conclude with a take-home message. So, what is it? Actually, it came from, this is a charcoal particle from the famous Tarpeta soil, so it's charred residues, charcoal, and the reason why we call it biochar is that it's produced technologically now, and it's used for ecosystem services improvement. So if you look from a theoretical scientific point of view, we have a physical structure. You can look at the particles used for the porosity is good for air and water storage. Then you have a chemical structure. I'm a chemist, so I like this very well. It's condensed aromatic moieties like polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, but much bigger, much larger. And we know from this type of molecule, it's very stable in the environment. These have been also proved in the meantime. So it's used for carbon sequestration in the long term, which we are talking here, which is the focus. And then we have some side chains, some functional groups at the edges, which can keep nutrients, especially cations, but also anions, which prevent them from leaching. So it's a nutrient storage capacity. And then in addition, not all of those molecules are really stable. We have also a labile part, which is variable depending on the production conditions. And this is the reason why microbial biomass is always increasing if we work with biochar in the soil, and it's also a food for microbes. And then, of course, we have some inorganic parts which are released during pyrolysis, and this serves as an immediate fertilizer. So theoretical point of view. And then now we have a practical proof of concept. Claudia already mentioned it, the famous Tarpeta soils. So this is the soil profile. I never thought that soil profiles, this is really, normally you will not find it in newspapers. Has contributed so much. You can find it everywhere, but it's originally, of course, my picture, and I didn't charge anyone. To stress here, the principle of Tarpeta is only, okay, we have the biochar, 50 tons per hectare. This is the reason why it's black, and this is the reason why we started looking at it, because it's very unconventional in this region, in the Amazon. But the trick is, this was my PhD thesis, not only charred residues are there, but we worked also with all organic leftovers, including own excrements, food leftovers, and so on, bones, with leaving back tremendous amounts of nutrients, such as nitrogen, phosphorus, 15 tons per hectare, a tremendous amount. And then soil microorganisms humidified it, stabilized it. And this is the reason why even several thousand years after creation, these soils are still there, they are still fertile. So biochar is one part, but bear in mind, from now on, we will talk about biochar. But bear in mind, this is the principal concept, and you must not, I have heard yesterday during a discussion that people still pour pure biochar to the soil. This is nonsense. You need the whole concept, although we are talking about biochar in the following. Keep this in mind, please. But this is proof of concept, so it works. And in addition, we have tremendous amounts of scientific evidence. This is a compilation of the Easy Web of Science results, which as scientists we use as peer-reviewed literature. And I updated this 2 days ago, and we have now more than 27,000 scientific publications with only the title biochar. If you put everything here, you find double in all these categories. And then 1,500 references. Is qualitative, and 177 meta-analysis, which is a quantitative amount. You can see that the annual application record increases exponentially. And if you compare to soil organic matter, this is what we discussed until now. You see there is a little bit, but the reason is it's fascinating and it's emerging and it's much better investigated than soil organic matter. So about biochar, two advantages up to now. First of all, we have seen the structure. It's very easy to predict from the structure what's going on, how stable it is. And it's much more investigated compared to soil organic matter, which is much more complicated. We have heard a lot, and we have less publications out of it. Okay, now proof of concept, ecological point of view. This is a meta-analysis of meta-analysis. The first one, the only one I know.
View of meta-analysis.
I call it meta-analysis. Claudia is also co-author of it, and it shows very convincingly the positive effects of biochar. You see here the zero line, this is the positive effect, and then it's divided into a biomass yield, which is around 15%. Then we have plant properties, photosynthetic rate, water use efficiency. Then we have soil carbon, microbial biomass, carbon, nutrient availability, and you can see the numbers are really clearly highly positive, and it's overwhelming ecological positive effect. You can see also some negative effects from the first side, but if you look closer, it's not leaching, nitrous oxide emission, and heavy metal uptake into plants. I mean, ecologically, it's positive if there's less. And overall, I have not seen any. If you make the same with compost, it would not be, it would be around here more or less. Okay, but this is not the topic. Now I switch over to carbon sequestration. There are also several meta-analyses. One of them I have made by my own or PhD student or two goals. And what you can see here, it looks very complicated, but I want to stress only on these two red lines because we have here various properties of the biochar itself and of the ecological size. So such as pH value, texture, and so on. And you can see here is the zero. This is the change of soil organic carbon stocks in tons per hectare. And you can see here the only two variables where we have significant correlation or combination is the amount of biochar and it's the duration of application. That means the more biochar you apply, the more carbon sequestration you have, and the longer the experiment lasts, the more carbon is applied. All the other variables, they have no significant effect. And it's clear if you look around, I mean, for the soil pH, it doesn't matter whether it's alkaline or it's acid, it's very stable, it will not degrade or evenly degrade if it's alkaline or neutral. Yeah, there's another experiment which is important because the biochar stability is a function of time. And what you can see here is a biochar degradation as function of incubation time. These are days. And you can see at the beginning it's highly degradable. This is the reason why you have label carbon, which is degraded. But if this label carbon is done, the degradation rate is very low. This is on an annual basis and this is on a daily basis. But the reason is, if you look at the literature, most of the publications reporting mean residence times for carbon turnover and biochar, they do it for several weeks or half a year, and you are in this range. So these mean residence times or the stability mean residence times are overestimated. There are almost no experiments taking longer than 10 years, and this is the reason why you still need experiments longer than 10 years, long-term effect. Yeah, and then of course, if we go to practice, we need, of course, life cycle analysis. There are also meta-analysis. You can see, okay, you have some carbon emissions. If you produce biochar, supply chain and pyrolysis. And the other one, avoided emissions, carbon sequestration in the biochar itself, and also additional effects in the soil. You can see it's carbon negative at the whole scale or in the sum. And comparing it to other negative emission technologies, I took only two, namely carbon capture and storage and biofuels, compared to biochar. So on a holistic approach, you can see that these first two, they circle around. It means, for instance, if you use carbon capture and storage, you produce power plants with fossil fuels and you store the CO2 This needs a lot of energy. And of course, a little bit of the CO2 is emitted. The same for the biofuels. So biofuel production produces CO2. And therefore, these both are closed circles. That means we can reduce the emission of CO2, but we cannot, it's not carbon negative. That means if we decide 450 ppm, which we are close by, ppm CO2 in the atmosphere, is enough, we need to reduce it. These technologies are not able to do it. Biochar, on the other hand, is carbon sequestration first or fixation in the biomass via photosynthesis, and then via pyrolysis, we make from a label carbon pool a stable. We can get it's an open loop process, and theoretically we can reduce the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere, and it depends only on the amount of mass we sacrifice or deal to this process. Therefore, this is the only really carbon negative technology compared to the other ones. If you look at the potential of carbon sequestration for Europe, using only residues, I summarized these residues, and the numbers are quite old, but in the meantime, there are also other meta-analyses using more or less the same numbers. So I presented these at the COP17, by the way. So summing up, we have around 500 million tons of these residues in Europe, and if you produce biochar with a 30% yield and 80% carbon content, it's 150 million tons. And if we look at the total emissions of 1,200 million tons, so we can offset with this process around 10%. So it's first sight very low, but I think it's a quite high amount compared to the solutions we have so far with carbon sequestration in soil. Okay, and now let's go to the practice. So what's the state of the art with carbon sequestration? First of all, we have, or all so far is voluntary. The best example is ecoregion Keindorf in Austria. So they use a pyrolysis plant to pyrolyze cereal residues and paper sludge. So it's dried here and it's feeded, and then biochar is produced. And then the farmers, they put it to the soils, and then local companies such as Biochar and also Hofer, which is Aldi in Germany, they want to sell carbon neutral products, and they pay the amount. And once a year, we have a Soil Organic Matter conference, mostly in January, and then these checks are handed over, and you can they are paid to this farmer 11,367. So I think it's a good system and it works, but it's a regional scale and they do not need any ETS or any regulation. They just do it, and it's a good thing, and it's also a good mood there. Okay, the next step is if you want to scale it up, I want to recommend the European Biochar certification Biochar Carbon Sink. To do with the structure of biochar, the stability, and it also goes back to a study where we were all involved during our biochar cost action, where we studied several biochars and the molecular composition represented by the hydrogen over organic carbon ratio, and it turned out there's a clear correlation to the amount of stable carbon, and the stable carbon, this is important also. I and our community define carbon sequestration or stable carbon as carbon which remains at least 100 years in the soil. So if you talk about no tillage and so on, I have no idea how long this carbon is really there. If I plow again, it's gone. A biochar, it stays at least 100 years, probably also 1,000 years. And here you can then calculate, depending on the material properties of your biochar, how much carbon credit you can claim. This is how this system works. On a European basis, this will be implemented, or it's on the way on the European basis. But until that, there is also a voluntary carbon market. If you want to reference this, go look at this website. You can see the actual numbers. And what you can see on the left is the perceptions in the costs. Purchasers versus suppliers. So the blue bar is that the purchaser thinks this is highest price I would pay for 1 ton of CO2. You can see this is in dollars, here's 200. And then the black bars are the supplier reasonable profit. So they, of course, their production costs. And here are different negative emission technologies. Biochar is here, direct air capture, BECCS, and several others. And you can see biochar is quite good because we are below 200, and the real price for biochar is around 150 euro, which is around $200 per ton of CO2, which is treated right now. And you can see all the others are, for instance, direct air capture, they are much more expensive, and the difference between the purchasers and the suppliers is much higher. So it's not realistic. And these results, it's not only theoretical, it is a theoretical survey, but it translates also into the real traded credits. And you can see biochar, biochar, biochar. So this is the highest one sold and delivered. And if you look at who buys this one, the biggest biochar or carbon credit buyer is which company?
Microsoft.
Microsoft, yeah. Okay. So carbon, we like to have. I have 2 more slides. Is this okay?
Yeah, good.
Okay, this is ongoing. So the European carbon sink is discussed at the European Union, but there are 4 others, similar ones. And I want to stress here, this is on the way. I think it's on a good way, and I hopefully have convinced you that biochar is easier than no-till, for instance, and more stable as well. The only thing to stress here is this. We have discussed yesterday also. Standards vary. Well, they have to be tracked to the point of sale, or whether application in the field must be demonstrated. This is a critical point which needs to be written down and discussed. So I think we should do this one. Okay, and then there's one more thing: the cascade use of biochar. So it's not only carbon sequestration and ecosystem services. The key message here is you should introduce it into your agricultural system as early as possible, and then we have co-benefits such as reduced ammonia volatilization, better soil, higher crop production, and a better resource use management. And my final slide is the conclusion, which is unfortunately a little bit disappointing. So this is the potential also from our review from 2017 of different natural climate solutions for climate change mitigation, at different costs and different ambitions. And you can see this is tons, this is petagram, this is billion tons of CO2, and the maximum scale is 10. And you know, every year we emit 10 billion tons of carbon, which is around 40 billion tons of CO2. So if you sum up everything we have, so also it's lower than 40. That means my key message is biochar is here, by the way, so we are in a good way. But biochar will not save our climate. That's clear. And if you do everything we have here, we will not save it either, because we will not compensate everything we emit. So the only way is to reduce emissions and to use everything we have, not only one solution. That's it. Next one.
Yeah, I think we have time for 2 questions. We all needed a coffee break, right?
Yeah, yes, one question. Can you please explain once more the life cycle of biomass, of biochar? So we have positive emissions, and how is it related to the negative emissions you calculate? So
the positive emissions is, of course, everything you need. You need to produce the feedstock. You need to transport the feedstock. This is positive because you emit something, and then you have avoided emissions. You refer to this one, or which one? This is the carbon as the highest.
The complete life cycle. So if you state that the climate effect is negative at the end, so this comes from, let's say, beneficial effects of this biochar.
This comes mostly from the carbon sequestered in the biochar, plus effects on soil which save, for instance, reduced fertilizer input or reduced N2O emissions is here. And in total you see a high variation, but everything is negative, and it's the reason why biochar is negative. And The most point is stable carbon, which you stabilize and you put in the soil.
Yeah.
And one more advantage is if you have this in the soil, you will never be able to get it out. So the cheating factor, if you really make sure that it goes to the soil, is lower than, for instance, with afforestation, where these certificates, they are sold twice or 5 times and so on. This is not possible with biochar.
Short question?
A short one. You have mentioned very positive effects of biochar. Why is it not exploding? Why is it not with the market mechanism everywhere?
Because it's too expensive, I would say. Because of course you need to. If you go back to this example, this machine is very old at Sonnenerde. But nowadays, if you buy a Pyric machine, which I can highly recommend, this one is half a million investment, and you need a lot of time to pay it off. But I think the good thing is CO2 price will increase automatically. So 28, if the transport and the building sector enters ETS, so everything will be more expensive. And then I think it could pay off earlier. And there are more of these examples in Germany, AWN and Pionero and so on. They are good in the market, but they are struggling. I mean, it's clear. And then you are competing. I mean, Pionero, for instance, or also Sonnenerde, they are producing growing media for balcony plants. And then if you go to the market, these temperate, one of them, there is also my face on it. So I say to use it, and it's a good marketing point and so on. I do not charge them for that. Otherwise, would have been also very rich, but I'm scientist, no businessman. But the point is, I know their business. It's really hard because they struggle and they need to compete with the cheap peat products, and the consumer does not know why this is better than the other one and so on. So it is really, I think this is the most challenging point. And I hope at least everything will change if the carbon price increases. And it should be quickly and should be tremendous. And then it will be more competitive, I think.
Can I maybe add? That there? I think we need to keep the time. Maybe I can just add that companies go for selling those products, the thermal energy and the biochar often in a processed form that is more, offers more revenue. And companies scale, and so the prices go down, but they are still high enough or too high for farmers just to purchase flat out 20 tons per hectare or something.
And if you go to the booth of Klaus, there are fancy products now. I think you don't know where the journey goes. Sometimes it's really positive.
So I have the pleasure of introducing Professor Maria Rosa Mosquera. I hope I pronounced it wonderful. So she's a professor, distinguished professor at the engineering department of the University of Santiago de Compostela. And I know she tries to connect silviculture, work with forests, with agriculture. And I think one of connecting element is biochar use. So we will hear about material properties.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, this is part of a project that we think it's another project called, that is about how forest resources types influences the carbon and nitrogen content on biochar. We have a project that is called Agroforestry for You. And this project tries to increase the amount of agroforestry lands that are across Europe. But the way that we try to do it is to obtain some money from the woody perennials that we have to introduce there just to increase the money. If you go to the Agroforestry for You project, you will find 12 currently existing value chains across Europe that are using this woody component, and one of the examples are biochar. Okay, well, the market of the biochar, I suppose that will be to increase, but material produced through the pyrolysis cells of the air, and this distinguishes from charcoal by its use as an amendment and its availability to mitigate climate change and sequester carbon. Biochar was used for a long time in my area. They are called a specific type of burning the materials in anaerobic conditions called trolleiras, and I was surprised that in Japan they are doing and promoting this type of biochar and they are including it as part of the carbon offsets on the IPCC. Anyway, that's the terra preta, but I want to highlight that it's also used in other places. Why forest land use as well? Because Galicia, which is the part where I come from, is where the Camino ends, is plenty of forest. We have around 70% of forest lands, 1/3 is conifer, 1/3 are broadleaves, and 1/3 is mixed forest. We produce the 50% of the timber of the whole Spain. And therefore, you can imagine we have a lot of forest residues, which can be converted in biochar. So biochar additions to soil increases or improves, we have seen that already, physical, chemical, and biological properties. And the idea is, the question here was, are all biochar equal? Are all they similar? No. How do they change? Well, it depends on the feedstock selection, of course, the pyrolysis temperature and residence time, and this was part of a PhD that was approved. So the general objective was to determine the combined influence of different tree species, conifers and broadleaves, with different tree fractions, because they are different, as we will see afterwards, branches later fall and green leaves, and pyrolysis time, 30, 60, and 120 minutes on biochar characteristics such as the total carbon nitrogen and the carbon nitrogen ratio of biochar and its impact on pasture production. Here you have the species that we use the most common ones that are in my area, and I have to say that the biochar was produced up to 300 degrees, but we made experiments with 300, 400, and 500 just to see difference, but I will not be able to show it here. Okay, the location was in Lugo. What we did was to go to the forest, take different fractions from the different species. Some of them are fast-growing species, other ones are slow growing species, and we make a pyrolysis and we produce the biochar. So, with regard to the comparison between the different species, you can see that the organic carbon is higher in conifers than in broadleaves. It can be explained because of the type of cellulose and hemicellulose they have. The total nitrogen is just opposite, is much higher in broadleaves when we produce biochar. And for this reason, the relationship between the conifers, the carbon nitrogen relationship is higher in conifers because they have higher amount of carbon and less amount of nitrogen. Well, we wanted also to see what happens in the field. And we went and make a kind of experiment using sand and seed-borne soils. And we just put two controls. Doesn't matter. The biochar at 50 kilos of nitrogen, 100, and adding some fertilization. So 50 tons and 100 tons of biochar, and afterwards we mix it with fertilization. Well, with regard to the plant height, we can see that when we use biochar, we increase the production estimated as the plant height of it was Rhizolium perenne, a very used species, in the soils, but not in the sand. Not in the sand. Here we try to see also what happens with the nitrate leaching. And what we can see that this is from the starting of the experiment. At the end of the experiment, we see that we have peaks depending on different type of conditions. But in general, we saw that when the mineral one has a higher level of leaching or nitrate leaching, the ones that they use mineral fertilizers, compared with those that has a biochar, which is a good news because we have higher production with less nitrate leaching, in spite of the results that I saw in the meta-analysis that we showed before. But this is just an experiment, and this can be seen in most of the periods where they were significant, as you can see. We also make another aspect like total nitrate leaching. Was surprised that we have more in the soil than in the side, and you can see that the opposite thing happened when we are speaking about the phosphorus. Well, as a conclusion, the study highlights that feedstock type and variability situation significantly influence the chemical composition of biochar. The feedstock type effect, we conclude that conifer has a higher carbon content, therefore is it ideal for carbon sequestration and long-term soil fertility, while soybeans are more effective as quick-acting soil fertility enhancer. The differential type effect shows up that branches has more nutrients that has more carbon, green leaves more macronutrients and therefore more macronutrients. The pyrolysis time increases the amount of macronutrients. And with regard to the production impact, the combination of biochar with fertilizers enhance pasture production and reducing nitrate. So I wanted to end this with what is next, because we are working with this. Because as I said at the beginning, not all the biochars were similar. What we did was to analyze 12 biochars that are commercially available in our area to see how they can behave depending on the different type of composition they have. You can see that if we take into account the distribution curve of the accumulated particle size, there are some that has a high proportion of small particles, and others has a high proportion of bigger particles, which of course can affect the behavior of the biochar on the soils. In here you have of these 12 biochars, what is the difference between composition, and we can see that calcium is quite different, potassium is quite different, and others like sulfur also have differences in there. We study also the specific surface area, porosity, diluted carbon, etc. And the idea is to understand the biochar properties to predict the behavior in the mix with manure, because as I was said before, we have to have an holistic approach. We need the nitrogen component in a better way to produce. And in Galicia, we have a lot of manure because we produce the 50% of the milk of the whole Spain, in Spain, representing only the 6%. So we have a lot of these two residues. And I think just to have a higher carbon offset on carbon sequestration, it's very important from a life cycle assessment to produce biochar to combine with the source of nitrogen of the most available resources that you have around. And the next step is a project that has been approved, which is SoilCarbon4Climate. This project aims at to evaluate what happens on 1 meter soil layers with different type of soils in 15 living labs that will be that are created already in Europe and also in the north of Africa, and Asia, Tunisia, Egypt, and Turkey. The USC is the coordinator. And in here, what we are going to do is to analyze the whole set of points that Lucas says that has long-term land use of a specific land use, which is forest, agriculture, and urban soils. To try to distinguish those ones that have a deeper soil organic layer, horizon A, from the what we call mineral soil layers. And we will make around 120 experiments taking into account these different soil organic layer component across Europe. If you want to download, I mean, you will have this presentation. Here you can download this map that was created by Javier Santiago, that is that, and play with this. So these are the whole set of projects that we have, or we are collaborating with them. So if you have any questions, suggestions, or whatever is there. And thank you very much. I don't know if you have any questions.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So there is room for some questions, and I would like to take advantage of being in front by asking what was the H2C ratio of the biochar produced 300 degrees, because that's really a low temperature. A larger plant and company would normally have, 500 to 600 degrees in most pyrolysis plants.
Yes, well, what we saw when we compare it with a longer period is there is not too much change in most of the components. So the idea is to make it cheaper at 300
higher
yes. And the rule of the biochar, for example, when sequestering carbon or the different nutrients, I mean, you can see that they play a role also. I mean, when we did, well, it was traditional use, like the troleiras, which is the same style than the the same exactly, but of the terra preta, they don't have 500, 600 degrees. I'm a researcher, so I fixed it. But they play with the temperature and conditions. But it can be defined as such.
What's the H2C ratio? Do you have?
We didn't measure that.
That might be interesting for
Yes.
the stable fraction.
So,
Questions?
Many thanks. Really, really interesting presentation. What I would be curious to know, having that, biochar is quite a versatile solution, so one can apply it across a wide range of agricultural soils. I'd be interested if it's possible to develop possibly some recommendations to say, hey, some kind of soils lack organic matter, for example, so are more susceptible to erosion possibly. You should have more biochar there, so that then farmers would also have better visibility of the solutions. Have you also done that possibly across Europe? That would be interesting.
well, we will have to do that in the two soil projects because it's a living lab. We will have many questionnaires of that. So thank you for the idea. It's something that we are evaluating. The impact of this biochar, of course, changes with the type of soil, the type of parent material, and the type of soil that you have. And of course, in some areas it will be really needed. Most of the Mediterranean areas, that is very difficult for them to go above on the top of 2%. And other areas, like my area, will have a less impact probably, unless you are speaking about mine soils or something like that, because we do really have a very high soil pH. But we saw that the biochar can help, like in the Brazilian soils, to reduce the impact of the aluminium in the soil, because we have very acidic soils.
Short question, short answer.
You have also organic fertilizers to combine with biochar?
Yes, the idea is to make, the idea of the Biofer CC and the subsoil is to combine it with the most available nitrogen source, which is manure. We are now characterizing several farms in my area with a company that puts some kind of pills, let's say like this, and reduces the ammonia emissions. And we have seen that these ones have some better fertility in the soil. So our idea is to mix to reduce because manure alone is not enough in my area because of the high saturation. So we have to compensate that.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So our next speaker is Lukas Kohl. We are together in a project, so it's my pleasure to announce him, because besides being a postdoc researcher at the University of Gießen, Department of Organic Agriculture, he's also a farmer. So he always thinks about practical implementation. And we heard that biochar is very expensive. So I think he developed a very clever application pathway for biochar, and I'm happy that he's going to talk about it.
Thanks for the introduction. My topic here, my work is not only about, as you see, about biochar, but I also looked on the whole organic regenerative practices that you can go for within Germany. The work that I'm presenting is now in review. Usually I would start now with an introduction why soil organic carbon is so important, but as we are here at the SoilCarbon4Climate conference and we heard already a lot of introduction, I will skip that. And also the part that there is a big link between climate change mitigation and regenerative agriculture, or there can be a link. You know that already, but when you look at also studies, most of them are coming from the US, and there's not that much coming from Germany in the matter of research, but that's why I looked first, what are the definitions for Germany regenerative agriculture? So what is it the same like in the US, or are we looking in a different way on that? First definition coming from a popular consultant, Dietmar Neser in Germany, he said he has also a big link to humus formation, that incorporating of living carbon is the key for regenerative agricultural practices. But he's not that clear in what to implement on the farms, as the other definition, where we have different implementation phases developed by Cote et al. And founded by the NABU and Boston Consulting Group, quite interesting. And they have 3 different phases of implementation that you can go for. And in our research purpose, that fits pretty good in what we wanted to do, because we wanted to establish different measures and see what they are going for, or what we can do with them. So as it is organic farming, we already identified, okay, there are some things that you can go for that are already happening in organic farming. But we identified also some that we can do on short term, like cover cropping, minimal soil disturbing, subsoiling, no-till practices or direct seeding, minimum tillage, or also underzone cropping, and also intercropping and biological activated biochar. And so our idea was, what happens if you combine all those practices? Because there's not much research going on system approaches. We always look on what does minimum tillage lead to, what does cover cropping lead to, but not what does the combination lead to. And that was our idea. So can we already, after 3 years, because funding was not longer, see if there's already a carbon increase in stocks that we can measure? And if there's not an increase, can we at least see on those early indicators, as we define them, that there might be an increase in future? So with water extractable organic carbon, with microbial biomass carbon, and so on. Yeah, what we did is we first established a research trial on my own farm, which is fully randomized, but we also had strip trials going on 5 different farms in the middle of Germany, in Hesse. And then together with the farmers, we defined different treatments, so different combinations of practices. The control was the normal organic farming approach here in Germany, which is a lot of tillage, with especially with plow, and not that much cover cropping. When you go for cover cropping, hardy and mostly only in front of maize, and not that diverse. And then we have the regenerative practices with year-round crown cover, cover cropping, companion crops, undersowing, also the minimum disturbing subsoiling when there are compactions. And then we have the no-till practices, which are did not happen on the on-farm trial. That's why we were first not looking at the results. It's only happened on the strip cultivation farms, strip trials. Sorry. And then we had a treatment which was on the fully randomized block trial on my farm, which was exactly the same as we've seen here, with a year-round ground cover and so on. But while subsoiling, we implemented triple biochar into the soil in 30 centimeters depth. That was 2.5 tons. And it was biologically activated. It's more or less exactly what you see here, and that you can see also over there where we have the biochar from Geisenheim stand. And it's biologically activated, but not added with any nutrients. So you might say it doesn't make sense, but for us, the idea was that the legumes growing afterwards are going down there. You have a YCN ratio, and with root manipulation, you will get the nitrogen in the soil. But that's just a side effect. The big effect should be that we have enhanced root growth and deeper soil layers. And by that, on long term, having less soil compaction and, of course, more soil organic carbon and deeper layers. And so much to that one. On all that treatments, we had a crop rotation with fava bean, winter wheat, and maize. Every crop was there every year, so we had a rotating crop rotation. And all those regenerative treatments had a mixture of a lot of species, cover crops and nurse crops and so on. Yeah, we did a lot of measurements, and then in the middle of all the measurements was, of course, soil organic carbon assessment. We did it the same way as the Thun soil inventory did it. So 1 meter depth, undisturbed soil samples. And I have to say at that point, when we sampled at the second time, the biochar treatment, we did not sample right there where the biochar was applied. We did sample here or here. So when you look at the results later on, you won't see the direct influence of the biochar, more the indirect then. After that, we did a lot of determinations. Of course, we did fractioning, temporal fractioning of soil organic matter, and we also had to do some calculations. So it was really important in our case because we changed tillage that we went for equivalent soil mass approach. Because otherwise, we would have had wrong results. We checked it, and it's totally different. So that was an important thing to do because the vertical soil layers changed from the first to the second inventory of sampling. And we also calculated the Haney soil health approach with the water extractable organic carbon and nitrogen and CO2C, and of course went for some different calculations. The results that you see in short are also all defined as the relative change in percent from 2020 to 23. Then we, before I show the results, I have to show you what the weather conditions are here in Germany, especially at my place. So we had in that 20 to 23 time period, we had 0.7 more decrease, minus 12% precipitation in average per year, 440 milliliters of rain. And that's not all. I mean, that was not evenly distributed. We had some cases where we had a lot less rain with high temperatures. And that said, I mean, we heard it already yesterday from the practitioners. It's hard to implement any cover crop. When you have an undersown crop, it's probably in competition with your main crop. And I mean, are we really talking about gaining soil organic carbon, or should we rather talk about retaining it in soil? Because with that high temperatures and standstill in vegetation, it's hard to gain any carbon anymore. But with that in your mind, we look at the results, and we see here on the y-axis the soil profile, and here on the x-axis the change from 22 to 23, and that's a concentration. And the different colors are showing the different rotations, and that's already one result. You see some crops in some drought years are doing better than the other ones. That's why we have a big variation between the two crop rotations. Well, we also see a common pattern that we have more organic carbon in 0 to 10, but less below that because we didn't incorporate it with a plow anymore, probably. And but we don't have that effect when we look at the biochar treatment, or not that clear. And when you look now at bulk density, you see we have much less bulk density in 0 to 10, and more. Especially in the one where we plowed in the deeper layers, and but that effect is also not that strong anymore where we applied the biochar. And in total, when you look at the corrected one with the ESM approach, you see not that we have an increase in 0 to 10 centimeters, we have a decrease by correcting it, because the whole thing changed. Because the layers are different now, and we have an increase in stocks here. In numbers, it's 0.9 tons per hectare and year by the applied biochar. You also can see positive trends coming from the indicators here, the honey soil health score. So the biochar treatment was always the best one, but also the normal regenerative agriculture treatment without the biochar was doing good. And the most interesting part maybe is the microbial biomass carbon, 0 to 10 centimeters, a big increase in the regenerative treatments, but a decrease when you look at the 10 to 30 centimeters, probably because you didn't incorporate it anymore with the plow, but you don't have that decrease when you look at the biochar treatment. So we somehow don't have a decrease in deeper soil layers, the effect coming from the biochar. We also have that effect coming from on the on-farm trails, positive trends going on. So all in all, we have positive trends, but we have to keep in mind without the ever-clear soil mass approach, we would have had wrong results. And I don't want to think about how many results in the past were already wrong. We not assessed that. And that's why we are going now for 10 centimeter segments also, and not that 10 through 10, 20 to 10 to 30 and so on. We do 10 centimeter segments to even be more precise. And yeah, it's only 3 years, higher variance showing us it's still in change, it's a whole system. But we can say that we have an accumulation already coming from the biochar, in German it's called Humusverzinsung. But to see it all, of course, we have to do to assess the CO2 sink. We have to assess the greenhouse gas balances and so on. And at the end, as a farmer, I want to say, I mean, I talked a lot about soil organic carbon, but for the farmer, economic aspects and climate resilience are much more important, and that's actually where we should focus on when we do further research. Just a short look in the future, what we want to do next year with our new project, Pick Up Bodenarbeit with Claudia, is going back to that site, dig out the whole soil profile and going to assess the root traits with AI. So that's 6 years after the application, and also look at the POM fractions and to get a better understanding what happened in the soil. Thanks for the attention.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think we have time for one short question. There's one in the back, Walter.
Okay, I think I do it without the micro. If you also take a look to infiltration rates, because your system should be profitable even for infiltration. And did you have results even in very drought years for the effect that the roots go deeper and are able to take more capacity of the deeper soil to get water from?
Yes, we did look at the infiltration rate together with Uni Kassel, and in general, it did look better. We also looked in the soil penetration, so the resistance in getting into the soil, that was way better. Also, control treatment. So yeah, well, we looked also on the yields. First 3 years were better than the control treatment, and after that year 3, it got better. So for both of the regenerative treatments, so we still see it's a changing system now, and we hope that at some point our practices will really come into yield also. Yes.
Is it a short question?
Yeah, just short. You said 2.5 tons biochar per hectare
Yeah.
was applied, and how much did it cost, or do you have a rough number?
That stuff here, I mean, that's the key point. That costs about 1,000 euro per ton, and but that's a normal price in Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, we only tested 2.5 tons because it somehow worked. And I said, like, don't want to apply like all the others 30 tons per hectare. I want to keep it practical near, but also want to have results. Maybe it would have worked out with 1 ton as well. So, and that would be a number where a farmer could say, okay, that's one-time treatment for the next 20 years, and might improve the soil for all the time. And yeah, that's maybe payable, but we will have to do more research on the different doses.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Lucas. And you, I'm really glad that I can take over now after having such interesting and ground-laying soils talks before. Talking about the amounts. What I'm going to present had huge amounts, which was due to combining enhanced weathering and biochar use, because the group doing the enhanced weathering wanted to measure a signal and we had to apply large amounts. But what we do, and that is what I add to Lucas' talk, is that we do in parallel, which I don't show here, also tries to try how low we could go with the biochar application and still have significant positive effects. So my talk is going to be about, just a moment, I'm going to set myself up. Is about biochar effects in the soil and synergies with enhanced weathering, which is from a different project, not from the Boden ABC, but I'm also giving some insights into that just to teaser you to go to the posters. What are the long-term effects of biochar in soils? This is still an open, ongoing debate and question on the effects on the non-biochar soil organic carbon, especially the formation of new organic carbon. That's an open question. There's some papers out that are quite interesting, and I think we will have a short look into that. On the prerequisites that support humus formation, what Lucas showed, and also root growth and soil nitrogen leaching. So do we keep N in the topsoil layer, which would be incorporated again into plants and so deliver, you know, the prerequisites for humus formation? On environmental effects on that note, like N2O nitrate leaching, N2O emissions, or on soil health, including maybe the amelioration of pesticide effects. I don't know what's with my throat. I'm sorry for that.
Some water.
Huh? Yes. Yeah. Maybe I should. So I'm going to talk about the introduction, a little bit about a teaser paper on this kind of humus accumulation on top of the biochar addition. Then a little bit about our project, which is funded by another ministry for combining pyrolysis, biochar, and enhanced weathering as mechanisms for CDR. And there is not just we as Hochschule Geisenheim, but also the Pick Potsdam or Ithaca Institute or University of Hamburg in this research consortium. And a little bit about this ongoing starting project, Boden ABC, where Lucas revealed the first results. So I can save some time because Bruno has already shown this paper a way back. And what I wanted to point out here, so this is the increases, and that's the decreases of the general use of biochar in agricultural soils. What you can see here is some of the prerequisites for humus formation are increased, which is the yield. So you have a little bit more crop residue if you don't take it away. So there will always be some trade-offs. And which is more important, the root biomass, root length, number of nodules. So the things that will deliver humus formation. On the other hand, nitrate leaching is reduced, and the funny fact, it's reduced stronger when the experiment runs longer. So there's an interaction between the dissolved organic carbon and nitrate being retained, and so on. So with first hints that there is an additive for organic carbon increase when you use biochar. This is one paper that I really like. It's from Australia. And from the group of Lucas van Swieten, and what they showed is one of the longest running biochar experiments established in 2006, back in the day. What you can see here is the control did not really accumulate organic carbon. This is a biochar addition, and it continued to grow in the soil organic carbon stocks that they had there. Then they applied again after more than 8 years. And again, you can see that there is an ongoing accumulation of soil organic carbon, and they split the former plot. So they did that again in the control and observed the same effect they had here back in the day. The mechanisms were that there was more retention of the root exudates and also of the microbial necromass, and a reduced release of CO2 from these pools by 18%. Well, what do we do in this CDR Terra Research Consortium? There's a lot of methods to remove CO2 from the atmosphere. You know that. I'm not going to talk about them, but there is some that are related to the land, which is soil organic carbon sequestration, what we are talking about here, but also biochar and enhanced rock working. So the big question is, if you combine those, you know, via co-pyrolysis or via co-application, do you get kind of synergies? And this is what we are investigating. And some peeks into this investigation are just here by what we do with, we call it pseudo-lysometers. We have a kind of 30 centimeters of topsoil, like the ploughing layer. We have a compartment for the collection of leachate. We can suck them out while everything is installed in the soil and put chambers on top to measure the greenhouse gas emissions. So we had our cultivars, several sets of vegetable production, and did greenhouse gas measurements here with a machine that we could, you know, it's an infrared gas analyzer, new one, which is quite sensitive. What we see is what we very often see, but the data are not totally processed, that we get a reduction. This is black is the control, the gray line is the rock powder, and the green lines have biochar in them, either pure biochar or a co-application or the co-pyrolysis rock enhanced biochar. We did several sets of crops, as you can see here, and what you can see then, I give you the results in a kind of condensed form. What we have here always is a comparison to the control, either in yield or in nitrogen. So these are two sets of production. And what you can see here, we always had the same crops: turnip, cabbage, pak choi, green manure, overwinter spinach, and beetroot. And what you can see here is that really very often when biochar was in that, you had a reduction in nitrate leaching. It looked like that. That is a cumulative leaching. So we had several events, rainfall on it, or simulated rainfall. And this is the culmination of those things that came out on the top, with the nitrate on top. Sometimes we have moderate yield increases, or a little bit more. It looked like that mostly, but you see, you know, it's not a green fairy powder. If you add biochar, we know that. So if you look at the total results, what you can see here is that in the rock powder, the enhanced weathering mostly had no impact. So it was mostly neutral, more or less. And the most positive effects that we observed were in the environmental section and also a little bit in the yield section, mostly with biochar application, and applying rock powder on top did not diminish these, but we did not see big synergies or big kind of boosts. There was no synergistic effect of co-pyrolysis. That also went for the carbon yield in the fixed biochar end product with the rock powder, which was also important, but I don't show that here. So that was just a kind of, you know, peek into combining two CDR techniques when used on land. And now I'm going to at least teaser a little bit about our project and come to an end. So there's a poster by Katharine Jäger. A lot of the soil sampling was done by her, also what Lukas showed. And there is, we have this meeting point with communication booth that's normally headed by Julia. So please join us with your lunch maybe and have a little bit more of these discussions. Oh, I'm sorry. Our questions is long-term effects of biochar. Where is the biochar? Where do we find it? Does it persist? Do we find it in the soil profile? And if we do, where is it? Can this biochar application cause additional increase in soil organic carbon? That's an important question from the global point of view, I would say. Biochar application, can it influence soil microbial community, their performance in biomass? And do reductions in NO emissions and nitrate leaching persist also when the biochar had been applied 10 years ago or longer? Is it still an ongoing thing? Because this kind of continued reduction of nitrate leaching that was observed also in Belgium on old charcoal making sites, which are now under agriculture, that might be something that in the long run could help this humus formation besides the biochar, that the N is not leaving the upper soil horizon where the plants are growing. Does biochar ameliorate, that's a new thing, pesticides effects in terms of soil health, in terms of the reproduction rate of animals? And we use standard ISO tests for looking into that. This is just to teaser, it's just to show there's a tremendous amount of work getting all these soil cores. And I wanted to point out to you that even in a heavy textured clay soil, we found biochar particles well below the ploughing layer. Please talk to Katharine as a poster. Maybe I should stand in front of this because it's really preliminary. So we shouldn't place big emphasis on that. Biochar, hydrochar, and straw miscanthus applied on the top of a grassland at the same amount of carbon when we started the experiment. So we see there is some difference, but as I say, it's preliminary. Please don't put a big emphasis on that. Finally, final slide, just to give a little peek in these ecotoxicology assessments, because it's not being done very often so far. We have a problem with pesticide runoff into rivers and so on. So the big question is, do we get different rates of soil animal reproduction, for example, or different rates in leachate runoff, pesticide runoff into rivers, if we have biochar in soils? And does this effect persist over a long time? So what we established is ecotoxicology reproduction tests following an ISO guideline with Bumila candida, the springtails. And the first thing we had to do was establish a test system and test it with an artificial soil. And only if everything is valid in these tests, you can proceed and go into your real soils. And we use this basic factor of 2, meaning the concentrations of the inhibiting or the pesticide quadratically. And we want to see if we have some protective effects by the biochar being present. So does it either sort the stuff, or maybe we've seen that there is a change in microbial performance in soils with biochar. Maybe the degradation of the pesticide is faster. And if so, do we want that or don't we? But we need to understand what happens, and also in terms of soil. So what we see is this is without biochar, that's a control. It's a quadratically increasing amount of pesticide. And then you have the inhibition of the reproduction rate, meaning here we have a concentration that totally inhibits springtail reproduction. And the funny thing is, if you apply biochar, you shift this curve to the right side. Meaning that you have a kind of the EC50, the value where 50% of the production is inhibited, is almost double in the amount of pesticide that you apply it, because biochar is buffering some of these effects, these negative effects on the reproduction of the soil animals. So now the test system is ready, and the next step is to go and test these old biochar amended soils to see how this effect persists in the long run. Yeah, so that's the next and the final step. And so I conclude, and I hope I'm well in time that we can take questions, because I really cut down on everything I wanted to show you.
What's hydrochar?
Thanks for the question. It's a kind of German specialty, because there was a patent in 1913 by Friedrich Bergius. It's a process, you would say it's like a pressure cooking pot. So it's 20 bars, 200 degrees, wet medium, and you kind of cook the biomass and make something that's called hydrochar, or HTC, so hydrothermal carbonization process. And there's a big question of how stable is the material. So in the beginning of that research, about 10 to 15 years ago, there were a lot of studies in Germany measuring also the decomposition rates. And we saw normally that hydrochar is quite decomposing fast. So the big question is, if we see in the end in this project that there might be an increase in the carbon stocks, probably not from the hydrochar itself, but we will be able to tell by the C13 signature of the miscanthus material we once used.
I would like to add that hydrochar is no biochar by definition. This is important because it's completely a different. But my question is related to your enhanced weathering. Did you measure the amount of this enhanced weathering?
We didn't, but the group in Hamburg did. So that's the project is led by Jens Hartmann from University of Hamburg. He is a geochemist, mostly working in oceans and enhanced weathering in oceans. But that he's a project lead of this Phoenix consortium, and so the group there does the enhanced weathering. So we are bringing it together in the end, and a lot of that samples I showed, the 2 sets that we had, were shared between the group in Hamburg doing the soil analysis and us who are doing the plant now.
There are no numbers yet, right?
Hmm?
There are no numbers yet.
I can't give you the number, or I can't tell you what the numbers are, because it's very hard to measure the enhanced weathering. We had to use a huge amount, 40 tons of rock powder per hectare, due to what they told us they would be able to measure. But I know that the signal to measure in the background of biochar that releases ashes is nearly impossible to measure. So we kind of, we had 2 different disciplines merging and trying to find out how to get the best methods to measure that. So it's one of the big problems in the measuring, reporting, verification of enhanced weathering is how to measure the actual amount of CO2 that has been sucked down.
I have a question. We are going to measure in this 120 experiments across Europe any part of the toxicology associated with biochar application, antibiotics and herbicides. As far as I understand from you, maybe I misunderstood you. You think that if you apply biochar, the effect of pesticides is lower. So at the end, we should recommend a bit more.
No,
I wouldn't really understand badly.
So thanks for asking that, so I can clarify. It was the effect on the soil animal reproduction rate, not the effect on the herbs, where the herbicide was or are aimed at. So I'm just going back.
It was the same question I had, but it seems like you would need more pesticide to
That is my concern. Yes.
The herbicide that we was used for testing how well the soil animals are able to reproduce. So if they are not able to reproduce very well, I would say that's an impact on soil health, because they are making part of the turnover of all the carbon and bacteria in soil. So, like if you have a lower earthworm reproduction, so it might be easier to understand if I say earthworms, because we all know they are needed.
It's about the residues. The pesticide makes the effect on the plant, and after there are some residues, and you test it.
This shows the animals.
Okay,
so
okay.
We have totally no reproduction of soil animals. So we have a high concentration of the pesticide, and these, you essentially kill the reproduction of your little soil bugs that do the turnover of all the nutrients. And this is a thing that's shifted to the side when biochar is inside, so that even if you have these high concentrations, you don't have as much of a negative effect. If you go to higher concentrations, you see the curve is steeper. So in this low area range where you have most pollutants, you will be safer if the biochar is there for the animals to kind of thrive and survive. So that's, I think, yeah. Maybe we can talk more about that. I would love to at the biochar exhibition that we brought. And I think now we are happy to have the next speaker after him in the audience, so that we will just smoothly transition to him.
Thank you. Yes. Stay to the audience. So I'm Hans-Martin Paulsen. I'm working at the Institute of Organic Farming. And I was asked to give some words on circularity systems in agriculture, and I decided to do it for organic farming because that is my origin, so to say. I personally worked over, let's say, 60 years in agriculture as a farmer's son, grown up on a farm, and I have more than 30 years research in organic farming and farming behind me already. And I try to give you some ideas what circularity needs organic farming has, and even other farming systems will have the same needs, I would say. So the easiest way is to, that's what we all know, is refinement system with animals. You can use for growing biomass and get a more or less efficient backflow of nutrients and carbon. That's standard. And the word would be easy if we would be a low number of people. We have a restricted area. We have legumes. We have a cow and some vegetables, and we would have our food. So, but life has changed and is more complex today. So I will not focus on this standard system. So one theory in advance. So organic farming has set certain system boundaries for such circulating systems. So general principles are high environmental and animal welfare standards. So organic farmers don't want to use soil disturbing techniques and pesticides, so to say. They want to preserve the soil life, and they rely on biological processes and complete production system. They want to establish farm internal and regional material flows. The farming should be based, let's say, on the region and the local resources. They aim to have soil-related crop cultivation. That's normal for agricultural arable systems and even grassland systems. It's more for greenhouse systems, all these aspects. But they have land-related livestock production. So if you have livestock somewhere, you need at least a backflow and a coupling to the soil. Yeah. And they have a restriction in the use of external inputs, mainly, let's say, chemical, synthetic nitrogen and pesticides that are lacking, so to say, and they, these aspects restrict the yields. And we heard from Axel Dunn and from the things before that that's the reason, main reason why the yields are lower in organic farming than in conventional systems. So, and if you look at the different organic farming movements and organizations, IFOAM Organics, International Federation of Organic Agricultural Movements, aims to help agriculture to be more ecological and to develop in this direction, not necessarily organically. The EU regulation of organic farming is a regulation that sets legal restrictions and allows certification. And that's unique, so to say. And organic farming associations might have stricter standards due to, let's say, market reasons or binding of their members and all these things. So that's a circular system, organic farming, and the system boundaries of organic farming. So it might be an own circular system needed. So that's a study from the colleagues at the Technical University of Munich from Professor Hilsbergen's team, and they did, let's say, groundbreaking long-term trials with biogas plants. So we heard about this. So if you try to enhance nitrogen and carbon cycling in organic farming, you need to refine your biomass somehow. And biogas plants are really usable for this because you have product, you have the energy, you have methane, you have a product to sell. That's a selling point and the economic benefit of biogas plants. And on the other hand, you create a mobile fertilizer and carbon source that can be applied somewhere when you need it in the crop rotation. And that's the important point. And if you look at this table, you see these are mean crop yields and of 10 different crop rotations in the plot trial in Kiehausen, close to Munich, followed over 7 years. And we see that if you generate an energy crop rotation and you organize a complete backflow of the biomass via biogas residues, you are able to improve the yields and a level of between 60 to 70% in organic farming. That's a lot, and that's a game changer for organic farms. If you are able to store your nutrients and the things you need for production, you will have an increase in productivity. That's what is needed. But you know, we don't produce any nutritional value for humans by biogas production, but you have an increase, let's say, even in wheat grains and even your sunflower grapes are improving the harvest of field beans in this crop rotation. So you have to find the optimal one. And the same trial, looking at the soil carbon, you see here the carbon input to soil organic carbon, some over 7 years in tons per hectare. That is what's applied via biogas plants and even all the plants growing there in the fields modeled. And we have the change in soil organic carbon stock measured in these trials. This is a one-to-one line. So here the input and measured increase is the same. And here we have 10 crop rotations without backflow of glyphosate. And here we have the same crop rotations with the complete backflow of biogas. And you see that the non-fertilized systems are close to the one, can be close to the one-to-one line. So, and here we have losses. So we have a higher input, but we have the same level of concentration. That's what we have before. So we have lost it in the system. And we see also that these increased lay percentages in these crop rotations are able to keep the carbon upright in the soil. So that's typical for biogas systems. You have an increase of yields, so to say, but not necessarily an increase in soil organic farming compared to non-biogas systems, which complete loss of the biomass. So that means you can use the above ground biogas somehow. You must use it to be economically profitable. That's why we are having this biogas line, and even refinement steps in milk and dairy production are based on this principle. So the model says, okay, soil organic carbon change is relies on the fertilization rates, the percentage of lay in the crop rotation, and the percentage of undersown crops and row crops. It's maize in these rotations. So simple and known things, but important. So, and what is not analyzed in this study is the direct turnover of the biomass. This is not analyzed in this study, but there's tremendous biomass available in organic fields. If you have enough rainfall and temperatures, so to say, this will have an effect, but it's better to use the above ground biomass for other purposes, like charcoal, for example, or biochar, maybe. So, what to do with this biomass? We did lots of experiments with the use of roughlet silage from intercrops or wild crop from organic farming in the diets of monogastric animals like pigs. So the colleagues replaced some parts of the protein and amino acids by proteins. So that's a good way to have a stability and refinement system, because organic farming needs this high quality proteins. And if we can generate them on the non-used biomass we need for crop rotation feeding, and that would be a good way to go for. And this works to a certain extent, even with roughage feeding in pigs. We know that, let's say, 5 to 10% of the protein can be replaced by this part of feeding. So that's an interesting result we have. So, and the table shows the pigs got a ration with reduced protein and losing content, and you can completely help over these concentrate losses by the silage in the ratio. So, and this is especially important if you introduce the intercrops, so to say, the main crops. So if you establish an intercrop after beans or peas, so to say, and you have wedge over winter wedge, so to say, you can prepare silage in spring and then grow maize. So you have double cropping then. That's a more efficient production later on. And you have monogastric production without female nutrition. So another way to go could be to generate high quality proteins from low value use. That's what we institute as well. So we imported really low value straw from Ethiopia and other countries, but it's also worked with German organic straw, so to say. We tried how to generate, let's say, mushrooms on these residues, so to say, and it's possible to produce some if you give in more nutrients, so we will have more yield. But in general, in principle, it's possible. So and we did it with residues from agroforestry system as well with wood chips, so you can grow high quality proteins by mushrooms. So an interesting way to go and to follow and to provide some valuable products on top of biomass and biocoal. So another study we had was on mixed cropping. So a mixture which is still present in practice, which it has been present, came from practice. We had it in research, and it's still present in organic farming. This is a mixture of field peas with false flax. It's an oil crop. If you combine it in the field, you have an equivalent ratio of 1.3. If it went all went well, so to say, you really have a big additional yield, in this case in form of high nutritive value in oil and energy. You can use this oil for machinery. We had long-term trials with vegetable oil, plant-driven machinery. So that's not the best way to use it, because this oil is really expensive. Really, if you produce an organic farm, should be in the human nutrition later on. But in principle, this works. But this mixed cropping system, we know that even in enrichment of organic matter and carbon in soil, if you have different soil level addressed by the roots and different crops, they can really perform well and even provide, let's say, more carbon in the root zone later on. But that's another way to, let's say, increase productivity in the same area. And if you look at this animal nutrition question, we are really successful with pictures of and cereals, so to say. The winter veg and common veg can be grown over winter, over harvest, and then they have a valuable protein for the monogastric animals later. So the last slide is products and benefits from agroforestry and hedges. So also Axel recommended it to do and to integrate it in the land state, and from the view of organic agriculture and even other more extensive forms of production. We will need shadow for livestock, especially in dairy production, even in pigs and poultry will need it and will go there. And in organic farming, the livestock is outside. We have the possibility of grazing of leaves. There are some ingredients animals might use. Experiments in using the cows from the dairy production on grassland and even in these shrub trees, so to say. We can use them as outground of poultry as a double use for this lost area, so to say. We can produce fruits. We can produce fast-growing wood and high-value timber and even biochar from this material. And finally, we will have erosion control, and we have to address humidity in future, even in this around Berlin. So we urgently need hedges. So on the ability to store carbon, we heard yesterday. I will not report the numbers here. So some conclusions. So circularity system should be approached in all farming systems to generate benefits in soil health and fertility. Organic farming especially relies purely on biological nitrogen fixation and organic fertilizers. So special attention to area efficiency and nutrient efficiency is needed, as I showed. The dual use of area benefits from woody crops and dual cropping concepts increase the area efficiency. And if we address innovative use of cycling biomass, it will help to supply quality proteins to livestock and humans while preserving the soil and adding carbon to the soil. And one comment to biochar, I was not asked to talk about biochar. So there are long-term trials with biochar in organic production already. The latest publication comes from the colleagues at the University of Munich. They have already a long-term trial with biochar. We have seen, or they found that the issue of nutrient availability in organic farming might be an issue. Maybe it's not so available later on. And even if we look on pesticides, maybe they are not so effective. You addressed it already, so some questions are open for these systems. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot, and I apologize for not introducing you because I wrote everything down and I just forgot to talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Questions?
I have a question. Maybe it's not too related, but one of the things that you mentioned, the systems are able to increase animal welfare. However, I don't know what happened here, but in Spain, animal welfare regulations are associated with indoor animals. So the benefits of agroforestry are really not recognized. I don't know if here the organic farming.
So if you are organic farming in Spain, also your animals should have outdoor access as you apply to the organic regulations of.
No, I agree, but in indoors, when they are not outside, let's say like this, they fulfill that. They have a label that says animal welfare. This label doesn't exist for animals that are grazing, which is something strange. So I wanted to know if here in Germany you have this type of. I mean, this is recognized because for me it's essential.
So that's a wide field, so to say. So if you look, let's say, at the actual behavior and status, health status, and veterinary and herd status of livestock, you are able to, let's say, have an objective view on the being of and well-being of the livestock. So outdoor access is not the main point, so to say. But we have this welfare labeled in Germany. So grade A green is organic farming with outdoor access, and even the outdoor access system have a plus in this label. That's what is legally done. If it's scientifically sound, it's not clear.
Okay.
Yeah. But if you see livestock outside and how they interact with leaves and trees and shrubs, it's fun to.
But the problem is that, at least in Spain, it's not recognized by us with a label saying you have a plus, even if the plus is very clear.
There was a question?
Yes, my name is Roland and I'm an agricultural journalist. Especially in Germany, we have different ecological systems like Demeter, Bioland, Naturland. What do they say in generally, and are they happy to use biochar?
At least they are interested to do, and they should need should know what they buy. They will know they have the right to know what they buy, and they need to know what are the effects at the end. So that's the same overall, I would say. I would say they are interested. The pioneers of organic farming already started with own biopyrolysis plants on farms, and they got problems with the legal effects because of the legislative components we have with incomplete digestion process, so to say. They already tried to do, and even this kind of initiative is based on organic movements. So they are interested. They are on the way already, and if we have a final product they will use, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to get an update. I mean, we can just to decide if you have more time. How about the online speaker?
They still have the technical issue, but I think maybe we'll just start 5 minutes final discussion. If he's not coming, then
yeah, okay,
maybe we can provide his presentation later on for all.
Yeah, so I would thank you very much. I'd like to, before we all move to the biochar, we can just use a little bit of extra time to do some discussions, and I would like to add, because I was reminded by our lead in charge on ecotoxicology experiments via Julia and a message that I need to name what we are doing, that we are trying to see the effect of biochar on non-target organisms for the pesticides that we test and use. Because, of course, springtails or earthworms are not the target organisms of a herbicide. Definitely not. But very often there is an impact. And I think there's a kind of under-researched topic. And if we talk about soil health in terms of we want more soil organic carbon and so on, then we need not just the microbial community, we also need all the animals in soil. And there's a meso and macrofauna that's often kind of neglected. If you look at papers, let's say for greenhouse gas emissions of together with soil animals, it's a very limited number that's available, other than maybe a bit on earthworms, and that's it.
Do you have any preliminary explanations to why you see this protection of microbial life with the use of biochar?
Well, in that it was a protection of soil springtails, so of the non-target organism. Yeah, there's two hypotheses. It could be absorption of the pesticide to biochar, depending on how heterocyclic the molecules are. They often interact with the heterocyclic biochar. And the other, if you go to well-established soils, you will have a different soil microbial community, probably also degrading the herbicide that you add. And we don't know yet what mechanism it is, but these are our two hypotheses, and we will try to investigate those.
Added to that, what you're also a negative effect on the targeted organisms.
Yeah, well, it was we took the most common herbicide, which is also prescribed as a kind of it's called positive control, because you see an effect on your non-target organism. And that was used by us because it's recommended in the ISO guideline to use. And it's a very common herbicide that's used in agricultural practice. And I think maybe we are normally coming from a different point of view, like soil organic carbon formation and so on. But I think this is a kind of not so deeply investigated topic, and we need to better understand what we do to the soil life, including not just soil microbiology, to understand the processes, I think, of humus formation. Because let me compare it to, we once had in Middle Europe big animals like forest elephants and macrofauna, megafauna, and they form the landscape. We often think about the climax state of our landscapes being beech forests, but it's probably not true, because all the interglaciers before had all this megafauna and the landscape were different. And the soil animals like columbola and earthworms and so on, they are the megafauna of the soil, I guess. So even they are not megafauna, of course. They will structure the soil landscape underneath for all the soil microbes. And I think it's an uninvestigated topic. This is why we sneaked it into the proposal to be able to at least start investigating that.
Also found research that 80% of woodland flora, they need high light conditions or they disappear. So, yes, as you were saying, if you don't have something making glades and clearings, then they disappear.
Yes, that's true. And there's a new research field called soil soundscapes, so that you can hear what soil animals are doing. So we have a colleague doing that. More questions, maybe also to. I found the method that Lucas invented for trickling down biochar in small doses to get to the subsoil and get the subsoil to contribute to plant productivity very clever. So let me just say that. So if there's questions also on the from a practical point of view, please feel free to approach Lucas. And
don't have a question, but I just want something that you might be excited to hear is that we are working on the development of a biochar module for our MEMS model.
Yes, tell me more.
So yeah, currently we hope to present the first result at the AGU conference. We put an abstract there. So it's done in combination actually with fire. So it's just say like it's a pyogenic carbon module, but we hope to be able to represent both biochar amendment and the effect of fire. So stay tuned. And we are not yet representing the interaction with the native soil carbon, but that's definitely an interest of mine. So we hope to get there. The data are not that easy, and we are using the hydrogen to carbon quality reference time. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear that because we were debating with both of us if we should ask you when you had your panel oral talk. And since biochar was not brought up at all in any of the sessions, we thought maybe we don't open that can of worms. But so I'm really glad that you are thinking about including.
Just and we're saying that the price of carbon needs to go up. But is there interest in this from companies, or are we just waiting for the price of carbon to go up? What if it never goes up? Are we just going to sit and wait for everything to burn? Or I don't know. It will go up. And when is it going to go?
But 27, 28.
Okay.
I also have a different perspective. I think that the co-benefits are now starting to be evident. And so even in a non-carbon market economy, all the soil health and agronomic benefit are gonna kind of start being an incentive for farmers. I'm particularly working with the coffee industry now to set up a circular coffee biochar, and the chocolate. I think Mars is also interested. So I think once they start realizing, in particularly for agriculture, ours, like in Colorado, you add biochar to the soil, it doesn't improve yield. It sequesters carbon and it has a little bit of increase in water retention, but we have alkaline soils and biochar is not going to increase yield. Yeah, but in tropical soil, when you have that huge yield increase and benefit, then the carbon market don't necessarily have to be in place. And you also have a huge waste effect, and so that circularity has a ton of other co-benefits. So hopefully those will outweigh the carbon market requirement to start using biochar scale.
27, 28, that's with 2025. That's 2 more years lost. Yeah. There's no way to get it going.
Yeah, let me say that there's a lot of meta studies out there. So we this kind of review of meta studies. We can talk about that later. Because there's a lot of new literature out there, and it's often also that biochar is combined with organic amendments. So, for example, I think in California, there's the Oasis Vineyard trial, and they combined both, tested both separately. I think there was an economic case for using also biochar on a poor sandy soil, but maybe not that alkaline, I don't know. From the soil. Oh, yeah, there was a question.
Yes, one short question on subsoiling. So, from the theory, so it is not of importance if you apply the biochar subsoil or soil. So just for keeping the carbon.
For keeping the carbon, the subsoil might even be better because you will have overall, even for the more labile fractions, the lower degree.
So I agree. But that's an effect of subsoiling and keep the nutrients inside there and to get entrance to the roots. So that's done by normal subsoiling. But I agree. So
what Lucas tested, that he did the normal subsoiling and with a total same set of parameters trickling.
The other treatment was just subsoiling, and the biochar treatment was subsoiling and biochar. So
it's subsoiling all at the same level at 40 centimeters. I see.
At the same time.
Okay. I misunderstood that. Yeah, great. Yeah.
And I have read some experiments in Australia that what they do is to turn the upper layer to increase the soil carbon. Did you do something like this here? Because you respect the profile, which is
Yeah, we respected the profile, yes. But I think there's a poster out there and about turning the subsoil down with a plow. And they did quite interesting research on that. Yeah.
Maybe just one note. I think then we will still be ahead of all the other groups, I guess, because we have
already out.
They are working on room meeting now, so maybe just 1 second, if you have little time, because he's really he's sitting on the other side of computer waiting all the time, and I'm sure it's gonna be very interesting. But if you have another plan or you have to do something, just written and comment again. I'm so sorry about the problem.
Yeah,
You can maybe record the presentation and you can just upload.
Yeah, we will have the presentation otherwise on the homepage.
Yeah, but if he wants to record it,
Oh, yeah.
his voice and explanations, and after we can contact them in case they set out.
Maybe
here. Yeah, maybe just in the meantime, one thing we observed, and we got a new research from, I hope I can work on that. Biochar often can take up nitrate. This happens to a stronger degree when everything is in an acid environment. So, like with root oxidase being acidifying, it's not a strong bond. And we tested if the plants can get the nitrate back from the biochar particles. So we picked biochar particles out of the field, which were totally rich in nitrate, which was funny because you only get it when you extract them several times. It's only slowly coming out. And then we use that as a nitrate fertilizer compared to calcium nitrate. And we just tested these two sets with two different plant varieties. And finally, my hypothesis was some of the nitrate is still stuck in there and we don't get it out and so on. But the plants essentially got everything up. So that was, we published it in 2020, just to raise the awareness that if you look at things like that and look at biochar managed soils, maybe depending on the height of the application and the aging and so on, try to extract it maybe one more time. Just, have everything on your filter, throw it into the extraction solution again and look what happens. Because sometimes I think it's overlooked that there is something and you can't really measure it if you use a standard model. We published that back in the day in 2016, I think, but I think it's still not very common knowledge. And this is just a kind of plea of looking for the unexpected or dealing with biochar.
You say high acidity, what pH?
The absorption of nitrate into biochar gets better. Normally, in a normal watery solution with pH 7, nothing happens. But if you acidify it, that's, I think, from 2016, 18, the paper.
Is that from just any, as it starts to acidify, it absorbs more?
Yeah, it's with pH 5, 4, it gets much better at absorbing it. And maybe if you talk about ammonia absorption, if you have a chance to have it sit longer before you use it, so just oxidize surfaces in a natural way, or use some, something else like H2O to oxidize surfaces, then the absorption of ammonia gets much better.